Okay, so we're on question number 13, and the question is asking us to find how tall is this tree. So I hope you notice here you have a right triangle. I have an angle here. We can recognize this as a trig question. Obviously, the first thing I want to do is I want to label my triangle, right? So here's my hypotenuse. So this is my angle here. This is going to be the opposite side, and here's the adjacent side. If you notice, again, they're asking me for the height, right? So they're asking me for the opposite side. And if you notice here, there's a number, they gave me the adjacent side. So they gave me the letters. I'm looking for the letter O, and they gave me the letter A. If you look at your trig functions in SOHCAHTOA, which one has the letter O and A? It's going to be the tangent function, the TOA, right? So I'm going to say that the tangent of 50 degrees of this angle here is equal to the opposite over the adjacent, which is going to be x over 150. Okay, so I'm looking for O. They gave me A. That's why I'm going to use tangent. So I set it up here, and I'm going to say that the tangent of the angle is equal to x over 150. I go into my calculator, I type in 50, and I hit the tangent button. I get 1.192, and that's equal to x over 150. By now, you should know that the first thing you want to do is you want to get rid of that denominator. How do I get rid of it? To get the x by itself, I multiply across the equal sign. So I'm multiplying these two together, and I look at that. I got x by itself, right? That's what I wanted to do. When I multiply them together, I get 178.76, which I can round up to 179 because they're asking me to round up to the nearest whole number. However, 179 is not the answer. Look a little closer here. When you found the height of this tree, when you got 179, what you got was the height of this tree, or the height of this triangle starting from the 90-degree angle up. But if you look a little bit closer there, the base of the tree is actually a little bit what? It's a little bit lower. And that's actually a total of what? Of 5 feet. So from here up on your triangle, it's 179. But don't forget that this is also, the base goes down another what? Another 5 feet. And that's why you add them together. 179 plus 5 gives you 184, which is the height of your tree. A little trick there at the end, just something to watch out for. Let's move to question number 14. Question number 14. They're giving me a diagram of two boats and a lighthouse. Guys, this was a very simple, straightforward Pythagorean theorem question. These are my two legs. Here's my hypotenuse, so I can say that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. It's not a special right triangle. They don't give you any angles inside to indicate that. And it's not a trig question because you don't have any angles at all in there. It's just a simple, straightforward Pythagorean theorem, which by now it's old hat to you. So when you do a squared plus b squared, you get c squared. Here you can see what I did. I take the square root at the end, and a is equal to 75. If you made a mistake, it was probably maybe on your approach. Pause this video and look at the calculations for the Pythagorean theorem. Let's move on to question number 15. Question number 15 is a trig question, okay, because they're asking us to find an angle. Now, first thing you should notice, a little red flag should go off in your head. They gave you all three sides, right? And when they give you all three sides, what does that mean? That means that you can use any of the three functions in three trig functions in SOHCAHTOA. So what I did here was I just did all three to show you that it doesn't matter which one you use, you're going to get the same answer for letter A. Okay? So the sine function, right, is the opposite over the hypotenuse, which is 5 over 13. Here it is. 5 over 13 is 0.3846, right? But remember, when you want to get the angle, you have to use the what? You have to use the inverse function. When I take the inverse function of that decimal, I got 22.62. Let's do the cosine of it. Cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. 12 over 13. 12 over 13 gives me this decimal, right? I want to find the angle. Look what happens when I take the cosine, the inverse function, the cosine inverse function of that decimal. What do I get? Again, 22.62. And if you do the same thing for the tangent, which is the opposite over the adjacent, you're going to get the exact same thing, 22.62. So it didn't matter which trig function you use because they gave you all three sides. But remember, guys, the question is asking you to round to the nearest tenth. Well, 22.62 rounded to the nearest tenth is 22.6. This number here is less. This is the tens place, guys. Don't forget that. This number is less than 5, so this stays the same. If this number had been 5 or more, then your answer would have been 22.7. But it's less than 5, so my tens place stays at 6. Okay? Now, let's say, for example, that they had like blocked out this angle here, and they wanted you to they wanted you to find A. Well, now you have the adjacent and the hypotenuse, right? So in SOHCAHTOA, which one has A and H? It's going to be the cosine. So you would have to find the decimal for cosine, and then you would have to take the inverse function of cosine if they only gave you A and H to find that angle. Okay, let's move on to question number 16. Question number 16, boy, was this a simple, a misunderstood question, okay? This is a simple Pythagorean theorem question, guys. They tell you that here's Jeff's house, and he wants to get to Tom's house, right? And now, if you get from Jeff's house to Tom's house, walking along the street, that's going to be 110 yards plus 62 yards. That's 172 yards, right? The question is asking you, look what it says. It says, how much further is it for Tom to walk along the streets than it is to travel to the direct path through the empty field? So they want to know how much further is it going on the street than it is going through the field. Well, in order to determine that, first thing I need to do is I need to find out how far is the distance across the field, right? What can I use for that? Simple, the Pythagorean theorem. When I do my a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, I get that the hypotenuse is 126.27. That's not the answer. They weren't asking you what's the distance across the field. The question was asking you how much further is it going along the street than going through the field. Well, going through the street, it's 172. Going through the field, it's 126.27. When I subtract them, I get 46 point something, and it asks me to round to the nearest yard, which is just rounded to 46. Okay, and that's what my answer is, 46. If you put 126 as an answer, you know what you're doing, but you didn't answer the question. Okay, you gotta answer the question. They're asking you how much further is it going along the street. Question number 17. Again, I hope you recognize this as a trick question right away. They give you an angle on one side and they're asking you for the other side of the triangle. So what's the first thing you should do? Label your triangle. Here's my hypotenuse. There's my opposite side. Yeah, here's my adjacent, but they're asking me for the what? They're asking me for the opposite, and they already gave me the hypotenuse, so I can stop right there. So which one of the three trig functions uses O and H in SOHCAHTOA? O and H, I hope you can realize that it is the sine function. It is the SO in SOHCAHTOA. So I'm going to say that the sine of this angle, the sine of 35, is equal to x, opposite over hypotenuse, x over 75. I go into my calculator, I plug in the sine of 35, it comes out to 0.5736 is equal to x over 75. By now, we should know, what do we want to do? We want to get rid of that denominator, right? So what do? I cross multiply. So 0.7536 times 75 is equal to x. There, look at that, I got the x by itself. When I multiply these two equal to x, I get 43.02. Remember that the question asked me to round to the nearest foot. So 43.02 rounded to the nearest whole number is 43. And that is the height right here of this triangle, 43. Let's move on to question number 18. Question number 18. Again, they want to know what is the value of x here, right? Again, guys, a very simple Pythagorean theorem question. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. When I do my Pythagorean theorem, I do my calculations, I get 113, I take the square root, I get 10.63. But remember, the question is asking you to round to the nearest what? The nearest tenth. Here's my tens place, guys. If this is less than 5, so this stays the same. If it had been more than 5, then this would be 10.7. So my answer is 10.6. All right, if you have any more questions, you can come see me after class, play this video again, and remember, everything